In this video, we're going to look at how to update the base install, the GA version, the general availability release version from July 2016 of ICFM or IBM Counter Fraud Management. And right now I'm going to start the system that was running 2.0.0.0, and I'm starting with the DB2 node or the root node. This is a 3-server topology, so root at data here, and that has successfully started using that startup script here. And on the right, I'm doing the same with the analytics server that also started up correctly. And now we're on to the 3rd server, and that's this server here, so it is now starting up, and that looks like it started up as well just fine. Now, one sort of practical problem with the startup script is that when you run it, it won't automatically start your server. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you try to go to ICFM, your core server here, and you go to your normal link CFM, you're going to get this error here, the internal server error. And that's because the JEE server, the Java JEE server, hasn't actually started. What do I mean by that? Well, log into your WebSphere application server as WAS manager, and then go down to servers, all servers, and you will see right here, this node has not in fact started. So you have to click on it and then click on start to start it up. Okay, sorry, my colors were inverted. Now they're back to normal. So it did successfully start. That it did, in fact, successfully start. And we have to refresh the page, it says, to see the current status. But sure enough, now it's up and running. And if I go back here and I refresh this page, then we can log in like you would expect. Okay, I'm going to log in as WAS manager. And we're going to check the system status to be sure everything is running correctly at version 2. So I'm going to go in as administrator. And I should point out too here that it does of course say 2.0.0 on that screen. Now let's go check the status. So I'm going to go to administration, and we'll go to the content packs, and we'll be sure everything is coming up here by going to system status and then waiting a second. And sure enough, we see all eyes coming back here, so everything looks good. Okay, so at this point we're going to follow each step from the 2.0.0.1 fix pack step by step and make sure everything works. So we're going to scroll down here to the first step. It says, notice before we even do that, unless otherwise stated, perform all steps on the ICFM server or on the ICFM data server if you're on the 3 server. Otherwise it's the everything is on those single servers. So we're going to do everything from the data server. Here on the right, I've got the data server, so let's get started. The first thing is we need to extract our fixpack file as follows. My download file is on a CIFS share, so not an NFS, but a Windows share. So I'm going to fill out this password and username separately so you don't see that, and then we'll mount everything onto the /mount directory. Okay, so now I'll do a cd/mount, and sure enough, I have plenty of files in here to choose from. The one I want is obviously this one. So if I do an LL and I list that file, there it is. So we can go on to the next step here, which is to make the directory. There we go. And now we're going to do this tar command, which is here. I'm literally just going to copy and paste it. There we go. Okay, that worked fine. So now let's go on. CD will into that temp folder, and then we'll do the MD5 sum and see the results of that. And you can see that that also worked fine. All the MD5s came back fine. Okay, we'll go on to the next step here and run that. Now here it says that we need to extract this file on each ICFM server, or we can do a mount NFS and set up an NFS share. I am going to use the former, which is on each ICFM server. I'm going to run this, which really implies copying that file over first, up as we saw here, extract that file and then do these steps. So really I'm going to do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 on the other 2 servers. I'll start with core. There's the first command and the second command. And to save time, I'll do them actually at the same time. So we'll go here and same command here and let those run. So in other words, we have the core machine on the right, we have the analytics machine on the left, and I'm running the next part of this. So first of all, that all worked. And now we're CDing into this directory. I'm MD5ing just like we did previously on the data machine. I'm doing this on both machines now so that we're caught up. Okay, that worked fine. So now we're going to run this tar command on both these machines, analytics and core, again getting caught up with the data server. Okay, and that worked correctly on both machines. And that puts us here on step 3, so we don't need to do the alternatively piece because we have already copied everything to each ICFM server, which means we're on step 4. Step 4 says if you plan to upgrade software ISII and I2I analyze on the optional supplemental server, do this. And we are planning on doing that. And of course that means redoing those same steps on the supplemental server, which I'm doing right now. Untarred successfully, CD'd successfully, running the MD5 now. And now I'll run step 3 because it does say each ICFM server, and this is the supplemental server. So I will do step 3 and then we'll move on to step 4. Okay, let's run step 4. Okay, and that appears to work just fine. So now let's move on to step 5. That means we need to move back to the data server. So we'll do our CD command, and that should work fine, of course. And now let's do our RPM, install it. And that also worked fine. So now let's do the next step of exporting. And now let's do our echo Java home in step 7. There we go. And now we'll go to step 8. Okay, step 8 I'm running now. And remember, you have to do this across the multiple servers that are involved. Okay, and now I'll just clean off the screen a little bit. We'll do our export and we'll do our echo Java home to be sure we get a good response. And then in step 8 we need to restart everything, so let's do that. But remember, there's an order to it, and that order is to go from core and then analytics and then data in stopping it, and then server startup is the opposite, data, analytics, core. Okay, we'll start from core. So core worked fine, so now let's move on to analytics. And same thing here, we're going to do a stop. And I'll just move that over to the right to make it easier to read here. And that seems to have worked fine too. So now let's go to data and we'll stop it as well. And that takes us through step 8. So now we're on to step 9, which is backing up the database. Okay, so 9a says SU as your user and mine is DB24 core. So that logs us in, and now we're supposed to, in step B, make this folder. So I'll do that. Make dir, there's our folder. And now we need to start the database server. So that is step C. We'll do db2 start. And that worked. And now we will do our quiesce. db2 command quiesce. And notice too that it says here we have to mention the instance name, and the instance name you can find by looking here, and it is actually the same thing as db2 inst core user. So ours is db24 core. So we'll go back here, clean off the screen, and force connection. Let's just double check, right? Force connections with a plural. Force connections. And of course I forgot to change instance name to db24 core. There we go. Okay, so this is our command, and enter. That'll take a minute. Okay, great, that worked just fine. So now we will copy this command, paste it in, and again, cfdb. And scroll down, that was G. Now we are in H, restore access to the instance. So our command should look like that. There we go. And step I, db2 stop. Okay, step 10 now is start all the components up again. And to do that, we need to go in reverse order, starting with the core server. And although the instructions don't say this, you need to, of course, exit out here in order to start the server. And there we go. And onto the analytics server now. Okay, that looks like it worked just fine. So now we'll move on to the core server and do the same thing. Start all the components this time, of course, instead of starting. We're going to start them instead of stopping them. And that also looks like it worked just fine. Okay, so back at the data server, now we need to go in and verify that we have our installation configuration set up, files correctly set up. So our instance name here is dev1. And we're just looking to make sure everything looks okay. Okay, that looked fine. So now we'll move on to this next one here for the 3 server install. And this should look pretty straightforward. All these values, SPSS, Counter Fraud, Web3 Application Server, and so on. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm just scrolling down here. If the root password has changed, ours has not, so we're not going to run through those steps, and that puts us on step 12. And here we have 2 steps to do. That's the first one, and we're moving that file, and now we're going to move this file. Okay, and now we will do a cd into temp. There we go, and now we'll do a DOS to Unix. And we'll do a chmod. Both of those look fine. And here we're going to now we're at step 13. We're going to do we're not going to add P because we actually never had an optional password to give it. So instead, I'm going to give it the D the I to give it the instance, and that will be dev1 that we provide. Okay, and we will try it. And here is some of the output we're seeing. I will maximize the screen here to make it a little easier to read. And you can see that the operation finished and ICFM Fix Pack 1 update was successful. So now let's verify that. So I'm going to the web interface. I'll go sign out. And now we see 2001 listed. Okay, and like before, I'm going to look at the content pack status, but this time we have to go to the hamburger menu, it's called, and we'll go down to content pack. And like before, system status. And we'll scroll down, and everything looks good. Okay, and now we'll move on to the Supplemental Server upgrade instructions. And this is a new optional installation. In other words, I have not got ICFM. I did not have the Supplemental Server set up with ISII or with I2 Analyze. So that is the scenario 1 in this case. So I clicked on the link for that and preparing to install the ICFM Supplemental Server. Let's do that. And it says we need to locate this file, so let's do that, and then we'll load it in Vim. Okay, here we go. And we need to make some changes here, so I'll do that. Okay, so I've gone ahead and made all those changes, and you can see the host name and the root username and the password, or the account and password, and you can see the DB2 information. ISII left all of those the same, and then the only real change I made here was this password here, and that is it. Okay, and then we save the file, and let's go back here, which takes us here, and then we'll go on to installing the ICFM Supplemental Server. So what we need to do here is run the next script. I'm going to get out of here. I will go down. I've logged in as root in step 1. Step 2, we need to change into the install directory. And the install directory is actually here. but with bin at the end. So we'll do a cd and then b tab, and it is in fact the bin directory. Okay, and now we run this executable, this binary here, CFM 3. We're in this 3 node topology, and I'm not going to use the password. And you can see that it found our server name, the host name, just fine. And here you can see that we got an error message when we attempted to contact or copy files over here to that server. So I'm going to do this, root at supplemental IBM.com, and I'm going to do yes to this so that I can log in. And basically we're adding this to the known hosts essentially. And we're going to try that again. And notice that we get the same error message here.